So we're here with Jeroen from the Technical University of Munich. Jeroen, could you please introduce yourself and your research briefly?
Jeroen Boeters. I'm originally Dutch, but I live already 22 years in Munich in Germany. And to keep it short, I study pollen, environmental exposure and allergy.
So, pollen and fungal spores have detrimental effects on health, and therefore these airborne allergenic particles should be monitored throughout the world. What is the difference between biological and non-biological components in ambient air?
Of course, as a scientist, the difference between biological and chemical is of course silly. But for the general audience, the chemical pollutions are nitrogen oxides or PM10, particulate matter, 10 micrometers or smaller, or 2.5 micrometers or smaller, or carbon black or ozone. Those are called the chemicals. On the other side, you have the biological, which are pollen and fungal spores. Of course, viruses too, but viruses are so short-lived, you cannot monitor them. You have to transmit them from human to human. So the difference is, all the people doing the chemical monitoring are focusing on very small particles, even 2 molecules. But the biological particles are very big, 20 or 40 micrometers. And that is a physical difference between the two, which makes it two completely different fields. So I don't think there's a real difference chemically seen, but it's just practically different measurement methods for both particles.
Which countries are currently undertaking biological particle monitoring?
Well, it is what you call who is doing what. There is a map of the world who's all doing it, and there are many people doing biological particles voluntarily. The chemical particles are done by law by the government, and they have networks and they spend lots of money and many people work it. On the other hand, the biological particles are mostly done by volunteers, medical doctors or biologists who have pollen traps or spore traps in their own environment. So the difference is, chemical is regulated by law, the government have to do it, and the natural one are done mostly voluntarily, except now in Germany, in Bavaria, we have now the state who monitors biological particles. It's called EPIN, this project. Switzerland is doing it now, and some part of Andalusia, and France and England are coming up now. So basically, the law obliges the countries to have a big network. Biological is not done very much yet, but it's getting stronger.
Tell us in general about the need for pollen monitoring and your task force on the map that monitors pollen centers in the world.
Well, we have the problem that chemical particles, everybody sees pollution as a problem. And it will take you, if you're exposed to these chemical exponents, it will take you 20 years before you're ill. But then you could have severe disease and you live shorter. Biological parts make you feel bad immediately, but you don't die. So that is, let's say, not taken as a serious disease. Politicians think you take an antihistamine and that's it, which of course is not the case. So biological are immediate, and 30% of the people have problems with that, depending on which country we are, could be a little bit less, but at least 1 in 5 has allergenic problems. So they make large part of the population immediately ill, and there's a large economical loss, either by drugs or either people going to the hospital or people not being able to work properly, or students who get bad grades in schools because they're doing their exams in the allergy season. That is all ignored. On the chemical side, there is nobody going to the hospital from let's say PM 2.5 higher than 50 micrograms per cubic meter, but those are regulated and it takes a long time. So short time, long time.
How will pollen monitoring mapping foster international cooperation and enable policymakers to compare local situations with that of the rest of the world?
It's like this, that the chemical networks are done by the government and they're official and they're sponsored very well. So they do a lot of publications. On the contrary, the biological part is often done by volunteers. And volunteers don't have the money to do all this networking. So not everybody knows who is doing what. And this new inventory, it's called Pollen Map of Pollen Monitoring Stations in the World. You can find it on the internet. There you can see all the stations who are monitoring pollen. The thing is, most people didn't know that the nearest pollen trap, let's say, is only 20 kilometers far away, or, surprisingly, 150, so not very useful for them. So people see that the monitoring is not very good. To put it very shortly, there are many apps, but no data. So people look at the apps and they say, well, we know what is going on in the pollen monitoring. It's there, I mean, you can see everywhere. But those are all modeled, calculated. Those are not real value. Many apps, no data. The map of the world, where everything is put, makes clear who is doing what. And it also says the address, sometimes the telephone number and the email, and there you can ask, what is the pollen count today, or where can I find your pollen data more regularly? For researchers, you have boundaries between countries, and getting across a boundary from one voluntary network to the next voluntary network is complicated. And now on the map you can see who is doing the pollen monitoring and molds in the next country. Very useful. If you go for vacation in Portugal, for instance, and you are now in Germany and you want to say, if I go there and I'm allergic to grass, will I have problems? Well, you just go to the map, you go to the location where you do vacation, you ask the people how's the pollen season, then you know, okay, I shouldn't go on that time, I should go on another time. It's called allergy vacation. Some people take an allergy vacation, they go away when the pollen season is very high and they go to the location where it's very low. They know themselves, but with the map of the world you can find it very easily.
Thank you very much, Jeroen. You've been involved with Yaki for many years. How does being part of Yaki benefit your research?
Research lives from corporations. And Yaki, for one thing, they gave us the money to make the map of the world so we know who is doing what. And that has been very successful. The other thing is people who work on pollen and molds need to talk to each other. And it's clearly a medical problem. Up till now, most people doing monitoring were more with the chemists. So do the chemical thing then. But it's more a medical problem. Yaki gives the platform where they can discuss and have contact with the people who treat the patients and see what is important for the treatment of the disease. So Yaki supports infrastructure in between the researchers, but also performs a platform to exchange scientific ideas. It has been extremely helpful in the last 15 years what Yaki has been doing in environmental monitoring. So I advise you, please become a member of Yaki. It's very useful.